Red Bull's engine fate after Honda leaves Formula 1 will be decided by the conclusion of a complicated argument in which the team's major rivals have different demands and tempers are starting to flare. Honda's going to exit F1 after 2021 and Red Bull wants to take over the intellectual property of the power unit so its teams Red Bull Racing and AlphaTauri do not have to return to being a Renault customer. We won't recap the background too much because you can view another video we made dedicated to the subject by clicking here, but all you need to know for this video is Red Bull doesn't want to have to develop the engine in 2022, just maintain it, so wants a planned engine freeze brought forward from 2023. The problem for Red Bull is that Ferrari and Renault were against that proposal because it doesn't fit with their development programs. The demand for so-called convergence between the engines before a freeze has angered Mercedes, and all of this takes place within the thorny issue of what F1 does with its next generation engine, originally planned for 2026. But we like a challenge at the race. I'm Scott Mitchell and welcome back to another video in which we're going to unpick this mess for you over the next few minutes. Ferrari's initial objection to the early freeze had a simple reason. It's fallen behind rival manufacturers in 2020 and views 2022 as an important extra year in its bid to catch up. However, Ferrari now says a freeze will be accepted if F1 brings forward new engine rules to 2025, if that engine is significantly cheaper, and if F1 ensures that complications around the freeze are managed appropriately. Team boss Mattia Binotto admitted the complexity of discussions over F1's long-term engine future make that side of things very ambitious and very tight to achieve, but he believes the short-term fixes are easier. Ferrari's immediate priorities are working out how to avoid a freeze, locking in major performance differences between the engines for 3 more years, and how to accommodate the necessary development of the engines with a planned switch to 10% biofuels in 2022. But that potential performance disparity has led to conversations about how to guarantee engine equality, and Ferrari and Red Bull are talking about ways to do that artificially. This includes Ferrari's idea of allowing a significantly underpowered engine an increased fuel flow rate, which seems pretty remarkable given how close that is to the supposed actions that made its 2019 engine so controversial. We'll come to this in more detail shortly, as this is what's drawn a scathing response from Mercedes, but the more complicated element of Ferrari's proposed compromise is F1 being able to commit to a new set of engine rules for 2025 rather than 2026, and what exactly those engine rules are going to be. Binotto says clarity will be required by the middle of next year to make a 2025 introduction achievable. That puts pressure on F1 to commit to its next technical format, while also finding a way to reduce costs. This has been outlined by every manufacturer as a leading priority, but every option for F1's next engine has pros and cons regarding its cost ambitions and desire to be road relevant, satisfying the manufacturer's appetite for hybrid technology. One avenue is for F1 to lean more heavily on hybrid development, potentially taking the contribution from electrical components to 50% or more of the power unit's output, and reduce the role of the combustion engine. Another is for F1 to adopt simpler hybrid technology and position the use of so-called sustainable fuels as F1's carbon neutral calling card. But Binotto says there's not clear evidence of which direction F1 should go. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner shares the Ferrari view that as a freeze would risk locking an engine manufacturer's performance in for 3 years, then if somebody has undershot, there has to be the ability to correct it at a certain juncture. The prospect of engine performance balancing drew an impassioned response from Toto Wolff, who has called it an insult to Mercedes, warned that it would mark the beginning of the end for Formula 1, and said it would be a humiliation if a manufacturer needs it. Mercedes F1 boss Wolff says Binotto's idea for convergence is no different to a balance of performance, the method used in various championships in sports cars, GTs and touring cars to equalise the competitiveness of different production-based vehicles. Wolff said it's not something that Mercedes would endorse, and in a further dig at those suggesting it might be necessary, Wolff said, "I cannot comprehend that any manufacturer that trusts in its abilities to develop a power unit and a chassis would want some kind of mechanism that would balance the power units out. I don't think that anybody would accept such a humiliation in public." Now, it's worth pointing out that Binotto insists his suggestion is not a balance of performance because it would only be for manufacturers that are far behind, not all of them, and it would not be designed to draw an ailing manufacturer completely level. However, Wolff's not alone in his belief that this is performance balancing and something F1 must stay away from. Renault's executive director Marcin Budkowski says that a safety net mechanism to prevent someone being at a massive disadvantage for 3 years might be necessary, but stressed that trying to artificially converge performance doesn't work in F1 because it's so complicated. Both he and Wolff referred to the complicated puzzle of an F1 car's performance and how parameters such as the power output, shape and weight of an engine have huge impacts. Therefore, an equalisation method could be manipulated. Manufacturers could design an engine to be packaged better within the car at the expense of total power and let the balance of performance take care of ensuring the engine itself is competitive. So Wolff doesn't want F1 to go anywhere near this, which means even the manufacturer that supports the engine freeze Red Bull wants has a problem with the proposal around it, and you start to see why this is even more complex. We've mentioned Renault almost as a tangent so far, but it has its own role to play in Red Bull getting what it wants. Horner's adamant it's totally impossible for a Honda continuation project to happen without a freeze, and as part of his campaigning to make it happen, he argues that the early freeze is to every manufacturer's benefit, calling the current engine prohibitively expensive and insisting now is the time to take action. But Renault finds that amusing and probably hypocritical, given only a few months ago Honda was against an engine freeze and further reduction in test bench allowances as well. Honda said if those restrictions were imposed it might leave F1, so Renault and the others backed down, and Honda decided to leave F1 anyway. But based on Red Bull Honda's initial position, Renault formulated an engine development schedule that includes 2022, and it doesn't want to sacrifice that just because Red Bull's position has changed. A big part of that is Renault's plan to adjust around planned new fuels in 2022. F1's got a planned switch to 10% ethanol fuels, rising to 20% and eventually 100%, intended as a phased move towards so-called third-generation synthetic fuels which capture greenhouse gases in the production process and reuse them rather than creating new ones, as the FIA strives to make F1 carbon neutral. The FIA is reportedly prepared to compromise on the timing of that, while the engine manufacturers agree that the synthetic fuel and new hybrid engine should be created and developed in conjunction. So new engine rules in 2025 broadly seems realistic and achievable and agreeable, but there's still a lot of unresolved detail wrapped up within that. Renault believes a 3-year freeze is a good way to reduce costs and allow manufacturers to develop a new set of engine rules, so it's open to discussing this further. But to have that 3-year freeze and have new rules in 2025, a freeze sometime in 2022 is necessary, and Renault acknowledges that. But its acceptance comes with a twist. The freeze will be at some point in 2022, either halfway through or at the end, and that it's too late to do it from the end of 2021 as Red Bull desires. So what happens next depends on how firm Red Bull's rivals are with their demands. Will F1 create new engine rules that satisfy Ferrari and on the timescale it wants? Can Renault be convinced to back an earlier engine freeze, or might Red Bull need to meet it halfway and allow for some development in 2022? And what if Mercedes' fierce objection to forced engine convergence becomes an objection to Red Bull's engine freeze proposal outright? And of course, Red Bull's hurdles don't end with everyone finally aligning on an agreeable engine path. It will then need to turn its Honda continuation plan into action, which is a colossal undertaking. A decision is said to be needed before the end of 2020, which means time is quickly running out. If we've done a good job unravelling this awfully complicated debate for you, please give this video a like and subscribe to the race if you haven't already. Plus, you can turn notifications on if you want to be alerted every time we have a new video, which is the best way to make sure you stay up to date with Red Bull's F1 engine fate.